the finance side of your firm. So, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a target for revenue. Like, what are we really aiming for from a revenue standpoint? Or maybe if you don't want to have a target for revenue, maybe you have a target for how many clients you actually want to help. All right, so we are in the month of September, and during the month of September, there are some amazing things that happen. So, for many parents, they're probably excited because their children are now back in the full swing of going to school. And if you've never had children or if you've never been around children during the summertime, what things that you know is if you're trying to run a law firm and manage the summer schedule of children, it can probably be a little bit overwhelming. And so this, I would say the September timeframe, like August, September, becomes a great time for law firms to really get back into the swing of things. And then also, for those of you that love American football, it is a great time because American football kicks back into high gear. If you're a lover of American football or just the whether it's at the college level, whether it's at the professional level, it can be a very exciting time. And one of the things that it also does bring up is that whatever it is, whether it's going back to school, whether it's football, it's being able to have a strategy to win. So I have a lot of friends who are teachers. And one of the things that we often talk about is how do you set up your plan for really setting those students up to be successful? And I also have some friends who are either football coaches or they played football at different levels. And they really talk about when it comes down to that beginning of the season, you really have to make sure you narrow in what is your strategy to win. And I think the exact same thing when it comes down to a law firm is I really ask you, what is your strategy to be successful in your law firm? A lot of times, a lot of law firms are just really going through the motions of, hey, we're just going to get out there, we're going to advertise, we're going to get as many cases as we can, and we're going to help who we can help. But if you really don't have a clear strategy to achieve your goals, you're probably going to be spinning your wheels a lot, or you're probably going to hit a lot of dead ends, or you're going to run into a lot of complications. So, here are a few things that I think you should keep in mind when it comes down to your strategy as it pertains to the finance side of your firm. So, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a target for revenue. Like, what are we really aiming for from a revenue standpoint? Or maybe if you don't want to have a target for revenue, maybe you have a target for how many clients you actually want to help. Now, I will tell you, I'm more of a fan of setting a revenue target, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a target that is to impress other people, but it gives you something to aim for because we need to make sure that there's enough money coming into the firm for you to be able to cover all the costs that you have, for you to be able to do the types of things that you want to do. And so, setting a revenue target can be a great place for you to start to say, okay, what are we aiming for as a team? And then we can start to break it down to strategy of how many cases do you need to actually achieve that revenue goal? How many staff members do you need to actually do the legal work to achieve that goal? Because it's not just something where you throw out a goal and magically you're going to get there. Is you need to make sure you have some strategies in place. Because as you start to work down that list, let's say for example, revenue goal is 5 million. If your revenue goal is 5 million, how many cases do you need to achieve that goal? If we figure out how many cases you need, then, okay, how are we going to attract that many people to hire our firm to actually support their legal case? Because you go from the number of cases you need, now we get into your marketing strategy. How are you going to attract that many people? How much is it going to cost for you to implement that marketing strategy? And then once you get those leads, how are you going to turn them from leads into actual paying customers? And then once you start doing the legal work, is how are you going to actually build them? Like, how are you going to send them to build to make sure that they actually pay? There's layers of this strategy that you need in place ultimately for you to hit and achieve that ultimate goal. Now, on the other side of things, you got to think about the operational side of do you have enough staff members? What is each staff member going to do to support the company's goals? And all of that plays into the overall strategy. So, as you're celebrating kids going back to school and getting back into the education, or maybe you're a big fan of American football like I am, where you're celebrating whether it's your team or whether you're celebrating just the idea of the sport coming back, into full swing is thinking about that strategy that they need to have in order for them to win. And ask yourself in your law firm, do you have a strategy for you to win in your law firm? Because if you don't have a strategy that you're working on, then you're just going through the motions week in, week out, and you're probably going to have a very low likelihood of actually being successful. So take some time to think about what is your goal and what is the strategy that you're going to have in place so that you can achieve that goal. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.